Hello everyone, this is Sean, and today I'm going to do a little tutorial, just go over how I like to set up for doing paint sketches and doing artwork in Photoshop directly. Okay, so today I'll go over a little bit about how I set up in Photoshop. I'll talk a little bit about layers, I'll go over some tools, tool settings, and brushes. Okay, so first thing I do is I'll set up a new image, so I'll go to File, New, and typically what I'll do is 16 inches by 8 inches, just in case I want to print this out later on. That's why I need such high resolution. So 300 resolution, 16 inches by 8 inches. 16 inches, it makes it really wide, gives me some room to play around, but typically my layouts are not super wide. And I like to label everything, so this will be our example for today. And hit OK. First thing I do, delete or create a new layer, new fill layer, and I'm going to make a solid color because this is not something that can be painted. It's a layer that you cannot manipulate. I don't want to end up painting on this layer. I want to paint on a separate layer. So I'm going to delete the background and let that white be my background. And actually I don't like to have white in the background because it hurts my eyes. So I'll change that to say maybe a yellowish gray, just to make it more interesting. Okay, new layer, and we'll call this sketch. Or better yet, we'll call it color because I need to go over color today too. Okay, so color. And of course I need to bring in my reference. So this is the artwork that I am drawing or painting. And basically this is, to give you an idea, this is what my finished product looked like. And I'm just going to give you an idea of how I did this. Okay, so of course I start with a photograph. And I'll copy and paste that reference into my into here. I'll throw that over here. We'll shrink that a little bit because it doesn't need to take up so much space. And just to make sure I did not accidentally. Okay, so got my reference image. I'm going to rename that reference. And I'm going to lock that, make a new layer. The only layer that I want unlocked is the one that I am working on. Okay. You could accidentally end up painting on the same layer as your reference, and that would be a big problem. Okay, so I've got my tool settings up here. So I like to use tools and I like to use brushes. Okay, so brushes, I'll click the B button on my keyboard, so my shortcut key. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start looking for color. Okay, so I'm going to come up with my color palette. Now obviously I'm going to need a flesh tone. Now typically what I like to do is click on my color, and I'm looking for his flesh color, right? So I'm going to try to do it by eye, and then I'll use the eyedropper to see how close I got. So it's good to train your eye to see color, right? So of course it's a little bit yellow, a little bit of red. And if we get up here between the yellow and the white, we should start to get some of those cream colors. Okay, his skin's a little dark. Actually, probably a lot darker than you think it is. Alright, so I'm going to go for this. That's a little too saturated, so we'll drag it over to the left. And I'm guessing it's probably going to look something like this. Okay, so now I can click on here, and when I use my eyedropper, it'll tell me how close I was. So you can see this is my original, the color I chose, and this is what the eyedropper sees. As you can see, there's a huge amount of variation actually within his face. It all looks like one color, but when you get down to reality, it is a huge amount of variations. But we're looking for a middle tone right now, so I would say middle tone is probably somewhere on his high cheek. And I'm not that far off. It's a little pink, because the cheeks are always a little pink. But if I were to come down here, for instance, maybe his high lip. Actually, I'm just off a little bit. I need to make mine. I should have made mine more pink. Okay, so I'll just make that one color, and then I'll start to look for another one. Okay, so let's go for a high color. Oh, you know what? See that? That means I'm on multiply. I gotta change this to normal. Okay, so I got two colors, and I'm going to go for a darker one. Well, let me try to do it by eye. I would guess it to be like this, but in actuality it is more like, this is the dark tone, right? Wow, a lot darker than I expected. Okay, so this will be my color palette, and of course I'll need one for his hair. So just to move along more quickly, that's a little more bluer than you might have imagined. So it's good to train your eye to see. Right, that's dark blue. Right, we would think maybe his hair is dark brown, but in actuality, because there's so much sunlight on it, sunlight is blue, it makes his hair come out a little blue. Okay, so that's just a quick palette. So color palette. Now I'm going to move that out of the way a little bit, and I'm going to lock that layer and make a new layer for sketch. Okay, and I'll give you an idea of how I set up for my pencil brush. Okay, so sketch, and press the B button for brush, and I got my brushes here. So of course, these are your typical brushes, right? You got your soft, your hard. So of course I could draw him like this, but this is more like using ink, right? I want more of a pencil. So what I'm going to do is go down here, I'm going to turn the softness, I'm going to make it a little softer. And size is okay, it's a little big, but I'm going to just turn that down a little bit. And then, come over here, let's see, I want to make this, I want to turn down my flow. This is important, this is what makes it get smaller and bigger with your pen. So turn that on, that's size, variability. And then, instead of turning down my opacity, I'm going to turn down my flow. And about 15% will make it. So what I can do is I can build up my lines. So if I go back and forth, it gets darker. Alright, so it's more like sketching. Okay. Let's see. So the way I usually draw is I look for big shapes. Well, first I'll draw gesture lines, okay? So I want to try to get that angle. So this angle is looking like this. Alright? So I'll draw that angle. And then I see a big circle here. I'll try to get that right. And then I see a triangle coming out from his jaw. I'll draw the eye line. Now again, this is at an angle, so I need to make sure I keep that angle. And then his nose line. And of course, this semicircle for his body, which comes halfway through his head. And I'll draw this right here. And just to move along quickly, I'll just draw only major shapes, okay? And of course you need to double check everything. Alright, so this would be his mouth, these would be his eyes, these would be his eyebrows. Now be careful, if you're trying to do a realistic painting, keep in mind that, you know, anime characters, cartoony characters, we usually make the eyes huge, but in reality those eyes are not that far up, right? Usually eye line is much lower than we realize, and much smaller than we realize. So in actuality, like if you look at top of his head to his jaw, his eyes are about the halfway point. So if this is the top of his head and this is the bottom, halfway point, that means that would actually be his, yeah, that's actually right. Okay, so his eyes would be a little bit below that, and eyebrows a little bit above it. And then mostly, your head is almost halfway hair. Okay, of course, drawing big shapes. Okay, that's starting to make sense. Okay, so just to move along quickly, let's go ahead and start looking at. So this is what I do. So I've got my pencil the way I like it, right? Of course, I could turn down flow a little bit more to make it more like a pencil. If I want it to be like really light. Yeah, this is actually more how I like it. So now that I've got it the way I want it, I should save this. So I'm going to go to my tool presets and create new, and I'm going to name that Sean's favorite pencil. So pencil. Okay. And so I'm just going to, well, I've already got one named like that, but basically, so now you just go and click on pencil whenever you want those settings. But we're going to change the settings because now what we're going to do is we're going to look for more of a paintbrush, okay? For me, this button here will bring up your brushes. I like to use this round brush right here. So this is a round curve. Round curve is actually very similar to what actual portrait painters use. Like it mimics that actual brush. And so you can play around with the stiffness, you can play around with the thickness, and you basically just have to keep playing around. Again, this went to multiply. I hate multiply, I want normal. And holding the Alt button, I'm going to cherry pick some color. Okay, flow is way too low. I need to turn up my flow. And just basically get this thing the way I want it. So I'm going to make that a little bigger. Paint with really broadly at first, and then you can work in detail at the very last, but work really big at first. And again, I need to turn up my flow a little bit. Oh, another major mistake I just made here. Keep your sketch separate from your paint layer. and label everything. Don't leave layers unnamed. That really bothers me. Okay, this is going to be paint layer. And again, everything should be locked except for this layer, because you could easily end up on the wrong layer and do all this work, and then you're going to regret it later. So just lock every layer except the one you want to be painting on. And you can actually turn off your layers if you want to. Another helpful tool, if you press, once you get set up the way you like, you can basically press the tab button and get rid of everything else. And of course, if you hold down the control button and the space button, you can zoom in. Hold down only the space button, you can move your canvas around. And with the alt button, if you're using B button will give you your brush, and if you hold down the alt button, you can quickly grab whatever color you want. So now my paint is going underneath my sketch. And if you want to get back to your layers and stuff, just press the tab button. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my sketch transparency. I'm going to change the mode to overlay. No, not overlay. What is it? Maybe darken. Okay, we'll just stick with normal for now. But I'm going to turn the opacity way down. So I need to see just a hint of it. Okay, go back to my paint layer. Press the tab button. And I can now paint like crazy. Alright, if I use that darker one, you can see. And still, my opacity, my flow is too low. I'm just going to turn it up really high. Okay. So if you want softer edges, or if you want to blend more, then you turn the flow down. If you want to paint really broadly or really quickly, and just start to block this stuff in, I would turn the flow really high. Okay, so you paint. See, I don't understand why that's so transparent. It seems like it's on multiply or something. That's on normal. This is on normal. I'm on the right layer. This should be locked. And I guess I just need to turn my flow all the way up. Huh. This is my opacity. I have shape dynamics. This is to make the depending on pressure, it's going to change the shape of the brush. And color dynamics is usually where you would change the opacity, but I don't have that on, so let's see. Pencil. Oh, you know what? I forgot to save my brush. So once you get your brush the way you like it, make sure you save it, okay? Okay, so we'll open this back up, brush presets. I'm looking for curve, round curve. You can change this. Right now I have it on text only. You can change it to large thumbnail. And basically I'm looking for this guy right here. Yeah, that's much more like it. Okay. I want to save this brush. Well, let me see if it's the size that I want. I want to make it bigger so I can block this stuff in. I want it even bigger. Let's see. Yeah, that's more like it. Okay, so now I'm going to save this brush. Tool presets. New. And I'm going to call this brush blocking in. And keep in mind that these are in alphabetical order, so if you name all your brushes brush and then the more detailed name, it'll work out really well. Okay, so for all my brushes that I have brush blocking in, I have pencil, and one last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to press the E button. It brings up my eraser, and I like to have both a hard eraser and a soft eraser, and you can change those settings by coming up here and turning up your hardness or turning it down. Okay, so I'll turn for my soft brush, I'll have it really, really soft, alright, and then I'll turn that flow all the way down to 12%, but on my hard, it'll be a little smaller for detail, and it's going to be all the way up to 62%. So you can see what that looks like, and you can see what a soft looks like. Okay? This is kind of like a rubber eraser, which is why I like it. So save those tool settings, and you can name them. And then when you press your B button, it goes back to your brush settings. So I'm going to go back to brush blocking in, and I need to make sure I can see if I zoom out a little bit, I should be able to see my colors. Hold down the Alt key, pick that color, and I can start blocking in this artwork. That flow is way too low. Again, working at this high resolution, you're going to have a pretty big canvas. You're going to need a fast computer. If your computer starts dragging, if your brush can't keep up with your stylus, then I would suggest either turning down the resolution a little bit maybe getting rid of some layers, or maybe using a brush that's not as complicated. These kind of brushes, they're like special brush ones. When you click on these, they give you this little thumbnail up here, and they're very dynamic, but they do use more processor speed. So if you were to stick with one of these up here, then your computer will work a little faster. Okay, again, I can press my tab button so I can get a little more space, get everything out of the way. And because what I'm doing is I'm using a Wacom tablet, and then I'm just using shortcut keys. If I want to use the brush, I just click the B button. If I want to use the eraser, I use the E button. And when I have the B button selected, if I hold down the Alt key, I can select my colors. And what else? Yeah, that's most of it. That's most of what I use. So let's start painting. Okay, so get this darker color and give him some shadows where his mouth is. A little bit, give him some markings for his eyes. And for everything else, I'm going to use this medium shade. I suggest painting really roughly. And by roughly, I mean don't worry about trying to stay inside lines. It's kind of a waste of time. Again, this brush, I don't understand why it's so transparent. Put the flow all the way up. Oh, here it is. I got to change this back to normal. So now, it should work the way I want it to. Yeah, there we go. I can lay the color in really fast. And again, work really rough. Really rough. If you're painting, just work super rough. Like even rougher than, even surprise yourself at how rough you work. Because I'm telling you, really good paintings, they're not that sharp. So you don't need to try to draw this thin line and then try to match up to that line. It's really unnecessary. If you look at reality, if you look at the way your eye sees things, there is no sharp, dark, like, lines between everything. Everything is kind of blends. Your edge of your head kind of blends into the background. And so when you paint really roughly, you kind of imitate that very easily, very quickly. And it's almost like having effects in your painting without having to work that hard to get paint effects in your painting. Okay, so just make sure, but you do want to get rid of this white. You don't want that white showing through. Okay, so I'll paint up into the hair and then get the hair and paint back down into the face, because the hair should overlap the face, right? And there's that sharp part in his hair. And basically I'll go outside the line a little bit. I can always bring it back if I need to. And then of course we want white for his jacket, which I can't see because the background is white, so I'll just work with the blue. So blue triangle here. Again, we can get these shapes correct, more accurate later on. Right, this is more of a big square next to his head. So just block in those big shapes. Always when you draw, paint, and sketch, work big to small, big to small. Okay? And what I'll do is I'll use another layer for my background. Drag this underneath my paint layer, call it background. And just so that I can see the white, I'm going to paint some gray. Maybe some light violet blue gray. And I'll just make my brush huge, and I'll paint some of that into the background. Computer's having a hard time to keep up. That's okay, I'm using a big brush, and I'm using a very dynamic brush. And basically I'm giving myself some background. And again, I don't like to work on white. White really hurts your eyes, and it's just so typical of an amateur artist to have like way too much white in their paintings. So the more you can get rid of the white, the easier it'll be on your eyes, the more professional your work will look, and it's just more fun. So it'll make the white that you do have stand out more. Okay. Now I'm going to go back, so I'm going to lock that, and go, so now the only layer not locked is my paint layer, except for this one, but this one I can't paint on that because that's a fill layer. So you don't have to worry about that guy, just worry about paint, okay? Then I can press the tab key, because I know I'm on the right layer, and using the left hand on the keyboard and my right hand with my stylus, I can just paint like crazy until I start getting accurate shapes. Okay, so again, work really, it's a little too big. Again, Control Z with your left hand. And for Photoshop, you need to use Control Alt Z. And there's a reason for that. This way, you can go back as far as you want, and then when you hit Control Z, it'll go back to the front or back as far as you went. Okay, so you have to test that out. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you just use it a lot, you'll start to see why Photoshop does it that way. Okay, so remember, when you want to undo multiple times, you use Control Alt Z. Okay? And that's basically everything that I like to do in painting. I guess I could make another one later on for more detailed painting, but really just work big and then start to work your way in small. Okay? So that's it for this tutorial. Thanks everyone, and goodbye.